Hey, everybody, welcome to Dear Asian Americans. Wherever you are, whenever you may be listening to this, we wish you all the health, all the happiness in the world. We are in May, which is Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. Mother's Day is around the corner from when we're recording this. It probably just passed when you're listening to this. So we celebrate all the mothers out there, particularly the mothers who, in addition to being mothers, are working and they're trying to do both. Many of us grew up with parents who did either or, I guess not either or, just the mother part. And so, you know, in our generational advancement and evolution as Asian Americans in the past few decades, um, I think we've been really lucky and amazing to see moms who continue their careers and at least seemingly try to do everything. My guest today is a friend I've known for almost 20 years, and she is one of these people. Mother, a badass executive at an ad agency, um, even has enough time to have created her own cooking Instagram channel, which we'll talk about too. Um, but to find somebody that looks like us at the highest levels of advertising in one of the world's biggest and most world recognized agencies and to win awards while doing it is so inspiring and so awesome. She's created some of the campaigns and ads that you and I have seen and have laughed about. And if you are a big car show fan, you have probably walked through some of her creations in the form of exhibits at auto shows across the world. Brings me so much pleasure and excitement to welcome Lee Wen to the show. Hi, Lee.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. That was a very flattering intro that I did not expect you to say. So thank you.
Part-time podcast host, part-time hype man is my new job. So tell us about Lee. What do you do now? Where are you? And tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, I'm currently a creative director working at Saatchi and Saatchi. Um, if anyone knows Saatchi and Saatchi, our biggest car client is Toyota. So I'm working a lot on that brand, creating content mostly in the digital space.
Very cool. So advertising is something that I think has taken on a different term and different meaning in the last 20 years, obviously, since when you and I were in school, it was very singular and it was not digital. That D word really hadn't come into play until you had begin in your career. I'm curious to know what got you interested in advertising in the first place, and to get a better understanding of that, I want to go even more far back and to understand how your family became Vietnamese American. How did you end up in Southern California? And tell me what your early childhood experience was like.
Yeah, so my family immigrated over here after the war, April 28th, 1975. I actually have that tattooed right here on my wrist, that
Wow.
date, just as a reminder to myself to be thankful. But yeah, they came over here. They were very fortunate because my grandpa was a colonel in the war, so he was able to secure um, a plane to bring the whole family over. They ended up in Vista, California, in the San Diego area, which a majority of my family is still in that area right now. But my mom and dad happened to move over to Orange County, LA area. We were the only family that kind of moved up to that area. So, um, yeah, I think your question was how did how did how did I get
Yeah, tell me
started?
about your early years of growing up, Lee, in
Yeah.
Cerritos.
So actually, I grew up in Buena Park.
Huh.
I started going to a Catholic school, predominantly Hispanic, and I experienced racism very early on. So I think not feeling like I belonged is a very big theme in my life growing up. After Catholic school was when it was suggested that I apply for the GATE program, which is how I ended up in
Mm.
Cerritos. But I lived in Buena Park up until I was 18.
Uh,
So after moving to go to school in Cerritos in elementary school, I was part of the GATE program. And for those of you who don't know what GATE is, it's basically like, how do I explain it? It's like you just, it's called gifted and talented education or something like that. And you have to take a test to get into those specific classes that are taught in certain schools. So that already, once again, is like another experience where like I'm segregated and I did not want to be. Like it wasn't by choice, but obviously having Asian American parents, they were thrilled and I was not. So that was an adjustment I had to make once again very early in my life. And then after that, I had to, a big part of the GATE program, everyone who went to it like wanted to go to Whitney. Whitney is a magnet high school. Again, a dream for Asian American parents. Not my dream. I just wanted to be normal and like go to like the public school. I wanted to go to Cerritos High School, and not sort of have to be subjected to like another sort of pressure cooker situation. So I took the test just to, my mom was like, we can decide, you know, if you pass or not, if you're going to go. And I just did it just to prove to myself that I could do it. So I passed, and of course she forced me to go, and I cried for like months, I feel like. But yeah, going into high school, again, another situation where you're kind of segregated to like a certain group of people. There were a lot of Asian Americans in that school. And it's funny because even though there were a lot of Asian Americans, I still felt like I didn't belong because there was a lot of Koreans, there was a lot of like Filipinos, not many Vietnamese people, but then the group that I ended up becoming friends with were mostly Korean. So once again, feeling like that, you know, not belonging, not only because I'm going to like a magnet high school, but also not feeling like I belonged within the group of friends that I had. So common
But
theme.
what I know about your high school is that it's a very small populated school. So, you know, it's not my high school class, I think it was like 700 or 800. So there's a chance that I don't know everybody. For sure, I don't know everybody. But in your environment, everybody knew everybody.
Yes.
And so
Keep going.
my question around the feeling of feeling other is fascinating to me because you know everybody, right? And everybody opted in, whether they did or their parents did, for their students to participate in this program. I was like one mom decision away from going to Whitney myself, which is a story for a different time. And we ended up moving to New York anyway, so I don't know how much that would have played. But yeah, it's like a parent's dream. Like people talk about it like in Asia, like, oh my God, you know, so and we've had other Whitney alumni on this show as well. Talk to me about that because I think it's a very fascinating experience because as you mentioned, Asian Americans are the dominant ethnic group at a school like Whitney. Obviously, the school and the administration population was not reflective of that. And I think school districts in the 90s were trying to figure out what to do with the influx of Asian American students who were just, I don't know, springing up everywhere. What was that in terms of your identity and particularly what you wanted to do with your life? Because I imagine the influence is not only from home, but from your friends and the conversations that they had about the expectation of what a good Whitney grad is supposed to do, starting with where you go to college and what you study. I know a little bit about it because I have a lot of friends who went there too, but tell me about what that was like and how did you manage to decide on art or advertising as your chosen path?
Yeah, I don't think it's a surprise that I identify as being like the black sheep, whether that being in my family or even at Whitney. The school was small. I think the class was no more than maybe 100 people, our graduating class. So yeah, everybody knows each other. There's a ton of pressure because there's so many Asian American parents who are immigrants who have the same sort of objective for their kids to either become doctors or lawyers. My dad wanted me to be a lawyer because I argued all the time. But you know, they bring them there to breed them to be ideally these types of people. And so I think there's a lot of pressure that is put on you, not only from your parents, but also your peers. You have people there who are so, I was about to cuss. Can I cuss?
Sure.
Who are just so fucking smart. Like, and the bar is like so high. So even the person who was not as high of a bar is still a really smart person, you know? So you just have this pressure where even though for someone like me who wasn't really into it and like wanted to do my own thing, I still maintained a pretty decent GPA just to like,
Keep up.
Yeah, keep up. Like it's not like for me, my own pressure, like I couldn't go there and totally not care. But I actually feel like it was in the end a really great decision to go to that school because although my first few years were turbulent. Like I was still figuring myself out, and like as a creative, like that's a very natural part of my own self discovery. But the later years, I'm still great friends with everybody, like who I was friends with then, and that's not very normal either
Yeah.
to keep in touch with your high school friends. And I think part of that has to do with the fact that it's such a small community. But then the other part of that is that drive that was instilled in me really pushed me to want to accomplish my own goals, and that's
Mm.
why I'm so driven. Like I'm a naturally driven person, but that I think took me over the edge. Like that type of thinking and that mentality really shaped, I think, my career.
How did you discover that advertising was a career option for you? And Art Center is not a popular college destination for many Whitney grads. How did that come into your environment and your atmosphere?
So like if you know me, I'm like not really like I'm kind of crazy. So like I think I messed around a lot in high school up until I knew that I had to like think about college. So by the time I got to my sophomore year, I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to do some research and kind of figure out what it is that I want to do. There's two things that I know that I've always been into. One of it is like arts, like working with my hands, and I've always been like an artsy child. The other is I was really good at computers. I used to fix um, a computer that my dad had in our home like many times. I would hack into things. I would think I was like a hacker and like you know all the things I shouldn't be doing. But I, funny enough, Googled like what type of career would match those two things, and graphic design came up. So I learned a little bit about graphic design. That was like a fairly new industry,
Mm.
and but I was like, dude, this sounds perfect for me. So then I found the best school for that because I wanted to go to the best school, and that was at the time Art Center. I took Art Center at night classes while I was in high school. Um, First, thinking that I wanted to go into something more architectural, but there was too much math in there. So I I took the graphic design class shortly after, and then fell in love with
Mm.
the fact that I can use a computer as a paintbrush in a way.
Oh,
Um, so yeah, that's how I discovered Art Center, and I was really determined to get into the best, get the best education for that career.
I hear themes of regardless of what situation you were put in and you resisted or you uh, had some challenges with your early childhood education at the Catholic school, almost to the point of resentment, and then fighting your mom's desire for you to go to Whitney. But all those tough years and experiences sort of created the diamond out of you, which was you wanted to pursue something at not only creative, which is creative and technical at the same time, as you just beautifully mentioned, painting with a computer, but also to pursue it at the highest level, which is well, not the honorable, the admirable
Mm.
thing to do, right? If you're going to do something well.
Yeah.
Um, and so from Art Center, what did you want to do? Is where you are today what you had envisioned Lee doing now 15 years later?
Yeah. This is like really weird to say, but it's true. When I got to Art Center and I understood what kind of career I could have, I immediately knew I wanted to be a creative director.
Huh.
That was my goal. And it was my goal because I knew that that was the highest that you could get. Like, that's so Asian of me, right? Like, but yeah, to your point, like the environment that I grew up in and the parents that I had, it just instills in you this sort of drive, but also the stubbornness to like not want to settle for anything less than the best. So learning what a creative director was while I was at Art Center, and then understanding that creative directors typically run advertising agencies or like design houses or like whatever the case. I kind of went that way. Like I figured out what type of person I wanted to be, and then I went backwards to figure out where those people would work, and then figured out what I needed to do to get into those places. So very strategic way to approach like my college and my career, but that's like my mind is very like I just operate that way.
I think that's awesome. You mentioned earlier that your father had wanted you to become a lawyer. Um, Obviously, telling dad that you want to go make advertisements or going into the arts field may have not been something that he expected to hear yet. you backed it up with, but I'm going to art center. I'm going to the best school for that. Um, was there support, unilateral support from your family in the pursuit of and career in the arts?
Um, I wouldn't say there was a lot of moral support. He didn't get it. He talked a lot of shit like the entire time I was in school. Like he financially supported like my living situation, but like the entire education was funded by my own loans. So like there wasn't a lot of support there, and there was again a lot of resentment. But it fueled me. Like it made
Mm.
me want to prove him wrong. And I think that a lot of people at the time didn't really understand like art school. Like why would you go to Whitney and then go to art school? But I actually think it's kind of a hidden strength to be able to have like an academic sort of like mind and apply it to an area that is a little bit outside the box.
Sure. I think the misperception about art school is that you guys just sit around and draw all day,
Yeah.
which may or may not be true, but obviously it's both art and science, and there are technical skills that you learn, and there are different ways to teach a lot of different creative sciences, if you will. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I had the same misperceptions about art school too. And yeah, I think, another friend of mine, who actually is our creative director here, on the podcast and stuff, she went to USC and then to Art Center. So imagine, her peers saying, wait a minute, you went to college and then you're going to another college. And I keep mentioning to her, you should have never gone to USC in the first place. But her Korean parents told her to. So
Yeah.
at least, you didn't have to do that and then pivot to Art Center,
Yeah.
which I think is the right choice looking back. Let's talk about your earlier years in advertising. I recruited for a little bit in advertising when I was in college around the same time as you. I remember complete lack of diversity. I remember asking to do everything for pennies because there were so many people. You'd be lucky to work here. Therefore, your starting salary is going to start with a three, maybe even a two. And that's not 300, 200,000. That was 30 something, 20 something thousand. And even with inflation, it's still nothing. Um, but it was a highly competitive field, in a particularly non-diverse industry or community, and even then still controlled by a small number of large entities. How did you break in, and how did you feel in terms of your belonging or chip on your shoulder needing to prove yourself in your earlier years?
Yeah, so the way that so my first advertising agency was Team One, um and they work on the Lexus account. And the way that I broke in was I did the sneaky thing where I cold called a bunch of like I found numbers of either like the directors who worked at the agencies and like acted as if I knew them. So if I ran into their coordinator, I'd be like, "Hey, can I speak to Tim?" And they'd be like, "Who's this?" I'm like, "It's Lee." you know. And then like 90% of the time that didn't work, but it worked on the design director at the time at Team One, and he took my call, and pure coincidence, like looked at my book and remembered my name because he happened to go to the art center
Oh,
grad show. And then
whoa.
he was like, "I actually saved your card. So I'm really glad that you called. Like, why don't you come in like for an interview?" So then I ended up coming in. I don't remember, like a week or something. And then it went really great. And then he ended up offering me the job shortly after as a junior art director or designer. So yeah, once again, like a really like tactical way to like find a job. But I knew that there was a lot of competition, so I had to stand out. So for me, it was like figuring out a way to not have to go through the process that would like I'd be like hundreds and hundreds of applicants.
That's crazy. If you're young folks in college or early career listening, take notes. One, you have to be the best at what you do. You can't hack your way into a job you're not qualified for. So that's what you demonstrated. You did your work, you proved yourself, you went to the best school, and you kicked ass at your grad show enough that the creative director of one of the biggest agencies at the time, still today, remembered your name. That's badass. And then you play the phone game, which might be harder to play now because nobody has a desk phone and people aren't picking up calls they don't know. Um, but that's cool. And you just
Thank
need
you.
it to work once, right?
Yeah, that was my thing. Like I think I remember I had like a list of like 100 agencies like in the LA area, even like outside of the LA, like other states. But yeah, I spent hours like doing that, and you just need
Just,
one person to pick up.
just,
But
just need
yeah,
one yes.
it works.
It's like that in everything, right? Like you
Yeah.
need one man or one woman to say yes to you. You need
Hmm.
one person to give you your first break. Um,
Yep.
I think sometimes we overwhelm ourselves with this great expectation of everything needs to be perfect, but it starts with one yes at a time. I talk to a lot of students who are just stressing over recruiting, especially now as we near or at graduation time. It's like you don't get an extra award for having 10 different job offers. You need one.
Hmm.
And so focus on the ones that matter to you. Um, that's a cool story. You got to have hustle and you got to be willing to work your face off. I think that's a lesson that never grows old. Um, what was that first experience like? Were there other people that looked like you? The person you mentioned that gave you the opportunity was a man. Were there other women in the industry at the higher levels, and were there particularly people that looked like me and you that you could look up to then?
No, I can't even remember one Asian American face in the team that I was in, or even on the creative floor. There were women, but not in like leadership sort of roles. Like there were like maybe like senior art directors that were women. But yeah, it's even to this day, I think it's like not as common. It's a lot better. But no, there definitely wasn't some sort of mentorship that I felt, maybe because of both of those reasons.
Hmm.
And it did affect me. I think I was at Team One for maybe a year and a half until I kind of burnt out, partially probably because of how hard school was, and then not having a break, but also not having a mentor. So I felt really like lost for a time. Like I reached my goal to get in the agency, and then I burnt out like fairly fast.
And on the mentorship angle, how has that changed for you, both from the mentee side of eventually having found your tribe, and as you have progressed into leadership positions at various agencies, what have you done on the other side to make sure that nobody ever feels the way that you felt
Mhm.
15 years ago?
It's a huge part in who I am as a manager and a mentor and a boss. Like I take everything that I felt, that I've experienced, that I wouldn't want another person to feel, or like what I would have liked to happen, and I put those into action every single day. I would hope that if you were to ask anybody who has worked under me or like on my team, that they would feel that, because I think being able to be seen or heard, or just respected, uh, goes a really long way when you're working under somebody. And I try to practice that every day.
I think from observation of you via social media and just being a friend, I think human leader is the word that comes to mind, regardless of the work at hand. I think just the photos and the videos that you've shared with your colleagues and the people that work on your team, I think they're pretty lucky. Because at the end of it, you're making advertisements or multi-billion-dollar brands to move the needle on purchasing decisions. It's not life-saving work, but unfortunately, you and I and many people listening have worked for people for whom they treated as such. And I understand pressures are hard, goals and incentives are aligned to instill that sort of behavior sometimes, but it's nice once in a while to find somebody who cares for you as a human being, and then the work. The work
Yeah,
will get done, needs to get done.
and that's a really big part of my philosophy. I've always said I focus on the people first, and then I think good work comes from happy people. So if you build a foundation, I think the roots of that foundation are your team and like the makeup and like the culture, and then the work. It if you hire someone who is talented, they'll figure it out. It's I totally agree with what you're saying, and it's funny. It's really ironic. Like as I'm talking to you, you would never have thought like someone who felt like such a black sheep would be a quote unquote leader, or like be seen in those like eyes to other people. So it's kind of like a really gratifying feeling, which is why mentorship is such a important aspect for me, because I at least feel like I'm making a difference, you know?
It's a testament to you and to the many people out there, for whom tough circumstances and bad experiences come your way, and how we respond to it. I'm sure there are many people who have felt as you did in high school and growing up, who
Hmm.
bottle up that negative energy, and just are just mean and angry and resentful for the rest of their lives. And if and how, I don't know, but when they get to these leadership positions, they just treat people badly because it's, hey, I went through it, so you should too. Or um, using really toxic phrases like putting in your dues, or you know um, this is the way that you grow up in this industry, and then just putting people down, with really forgetting both the positive and the negative feelings that we feel when leaders and managers treat us in different ways. You've progressed your career through various agencies, many of them household names. What I see as a common thread, though, is Toyota slash Lexus has been your client throughout. Um, I hope everybody knows that they are parent, or the parent company is a Japanese company at this point. They obviously have their American divisions led by folks here, as recently in Torrance here in Southern California, and moved over to Texas. Um, and we talked about sort of the team not being diverse at all from a race or a gender perspective. Were there points where you felt that creative decisions representing what were in essence Asian brands in America, there were unnecessary challenges being thrown in the way, or messaging and communication challenges that were rearing its ugly head because of the lack of customer voice in the decision making rooms?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that like I I would feel that way specifically about specific like Toyota or Lexus like projects I've been on, but I've definitely witnessed that type of challenge where we may be presenting to an Asian client and you have like an all white cast of people who are presenting and talking about their culture, and it's like, I don't know if that's I don't maybe you shouldn't say that, or like that might not make sense. I think there's like a sort of like a privileged, not intentional, but like that privileged approach of like, well, like I'm a creative director, therefore like I know what is the best thing to be done here, and not really bringing in someone with more insight, cultural insight, to kind of help facilitate what you're selling. I've seen that happen.
I think we all have. I've been in client services too, and it's just, I think the privilege compounds and the blinders compound as well. So I don't think people are inherently mean or evil or ill spirited. Some things just probably better left unsaid. I want to get your take on the industry as a whole. Advertising has always been a very popular choice because of the medium that you and I grew up watching, which were TV ads. Super Bowl ads were the creme de la creme, and I'm sure in your industry, winning awards and having those experiences to create and produce those shows were of great big honor, and even some things that I dreamt of doing when I grew up, when I was a much younger child. The world has changed, obviously, with the introduction of banner ads on the internet, and now with everything digital and everything influencer and social, and everything in between. That the world has changed. With that change, how has your industry changed, and how have you managed to stay ahead of the game and relevant, and um, just kicking ass in your industry?
Yeah, I actually, when I went into advertising, I was more interested in like packaging and print and branding. And then within my stint at Team One, I shortly like foresaw that digital was slowly creeping up and becoming something relevant. So I intentionally, like with my next move, um, I focused a little bit more on agencies that had more of a digital offering, because I felt like that's something that I had to understand and learn more of if I wanted to continue to evolve. So even during my short time, like I've been, I don't know, what year is it? I've been doing this for 13 to 15 years. And in that time, I've seen that shift happen. And even today, even with this whole COVID-19 situation, all of us having to work from home and seeing the speed at which we need to evolve
Mm.
quickly in order to be prepared for the future, is a testament within itself that like digital is just, it's here, it's been here. And for those who aren't able to evolve to, you know, meet the needs of the consumer and how we're evolving as like a social and cultural landscape, it's, you're going to get left behind. Um, yeah, the change, it's crazy because I think in the beginning when I started, print and broadcast and all that was like still the sexy thing to do. Halfway through my career, it was like, for those who were smart, knew that digital is really, really growing rapidly. And then today, I feel like digital is king.
Right.
100%. Yeah.
And will change again. We don't know to what
Mhm.
or when. I want to get your take on something that I always found super fascinating, which is marketing to people like me and you. Second, potentially third generation Asian Americans. English is our preferred language. We were educated here. On paper, on our resumes, we know we look no different than our non-Asian counterparts. Yet we respond to marketing a little bit differently.
Mhm.
When big, large brands think about multicultural marketing or Asian marketing, it's usually in language, whether it's Vietnamese or Korean or Mandarin, and targeted towards our parents' generation. Um, Brands and marketers have always had, in my opinion, a challenge marketing to us because we're not mainstream demographic. We listen to different music. Our tastes are different. Our collective education, disposable income, all that levels are attractive to demographers. How do you how would you market to yourself, and what are some tips that you can share from a from your perspective of what makes our community unique and also a challenge in marketing to us?
That's such an interesting question. I think I've always felt like our generation, like after our parents, is kind of like responsible for kind of, I've been using this term a lot, like breaking the chain. You know, there's this expectation of immigrants who come here and like the life that they're trying to build that they instill in their children. Their children end up like carrying the burden on their back and then having children of their own who kind of get a fresh slate. I feel like I'm like in this middle ground of like breaking this chain so my daughter can have like a brand new experience. But the funny thing is I think we understand both sides. Like I think it's really strange when people have to put Asian American people in ads to like market to us because I like the same thing that like anybody else likes. I think we're all American at this point, so I think we identify as American. So whatever American demographics are in terms of like taste and culture, it's all the same. It's not like Asians specifically like only certain things. You know, like we all have our own personal taste, but yeah. But there's this also this sensitivity to our immigrant parents and like this level of like um, responsibility that we have. So like I can understand why they have a tough time figuring out how to market to such a niche group of people. And I think part of that has to do with, I don't know, maybe there aren't a lot of strategists who are Asian Americans who work in agencies. Therefore, they aren't really culling the right insights specific to that market because they're just looking at us as Asian.
Right.
And if you're Asian, like I get targeted ads in Vietnamese, I can't read it. Like, I don't,
But you're like,
I
how
can't
did you
read.
find my address and know I lived here?
Yeah, just because my last name's Nguyen,
Yep.
you think I like pho, which I do, but
Which fair.
but you know, it's like that weird middle ground where like it's when you look at agencies and how they market, it's a very you're either in this bucket or you're in this
Right.
bucket, and this middle area that we're in, that is a transitional stage, and you know, it's not gonna the way that we are isn't gonna last for a long time, and I think that's why it's hard. Like it's so specific.
It is a challenge. You know, I was having a recent conversation with somebody who is helping with Asian American or Asian community outreach for the census, and they're tasked to do both. They're tasked to talk to our parents, basically, with in-language stuff and instructions and messaging that gets to them, the newspapers and the TV shows that they consume. And then they have to talk to us. So, they reached out to say, hey, how can we work with the podcast to make sure that it gets into the ears of people that care? Because there's really we don't have our own BET, we don't have a Telemundo, we don't have a mainstream or even a household name, because we're not a monolith. Can you imagine
Mhm.
programming for one Asian American TV channel? Like it
Mhm.
doesn't work. We can't agree on a color, we can't agree on a food that represents us, and that's beautiful because that just means we are so diverse. Um,
Mhm.
so I think as brands progress and newer brands and more as the medium itself changes too, really, really fascinated to see how people market to us, because I think it's nice to see people who look like us in ads, as long as it doesn't feel like it's deliberately placed there to check the
Mhm.
box. Um,
Yeah. At the moment, I feel like that's the case, right? It's like, we got to advertise to Asian Americans, go cast an Asian American. I'm like,
mhm,
well, what's the intent?
right.
Like, what is it that what message are you trying to get across? Like, what's the objective? And like, is the Asian person the right, person to deliver that message? Or like, it just depends. Like,
Yeah.
it's not like a one size fits all,
It's
just like you
not
said.
right, but I think even having you or somebody else in your position in the room to even declare that notion of, we're complicated, we're different. How you came to America, under what circumstances, greatly changes your impression of what America is. Um, I got to be honest, people have heard me say this often on this show. I was not informed enough, and I was not ready to hear all the refugee stories from my Vietnamese friends. I can't imagine it.
Mhm.
That wasn't my experience,
Yeah.
because I am also blinded by my own experience and my own privilege. Immigrating to America meant actively choosing to jump on a plane with resources to come here to start anew. That
Hmm.
wasn't like that for everybody.
Hmm.
And so if I have that challenge, some of our non-Asian friends, older white men in these leadership positions, how are we ever going to work? What challenge does it present for them to understand where we come from collectively,
Hmm.
so that they are making appropriate and sensitive and inclusive decisions on really marketing, which is the touch point for connection to brands and to people. So I think really excited to see where things go. Obviously, with all that's going on with COVID and stuff, brands are introspecting and figuring out how to best allocate their resources and what they want to be known for coming out of this. Because overnight, um, buying cars or buying football tickets doesn't seem to be the most important thing in the world. So how do you, as you mentioned earlier, the human side, like how do you be human first? Because
Yeah.
we'll sell cars later eventually. We'll play football eventually, and that's going to be okay. But right now, what do people need to hear? Um, so you are the proud co-lead of a resource group at your company, geared towards parents. Um, it's a challenging duality of identity. It's not binary. You're your parent and an executive. Um, how has that balance been for you? And how was it different? How do you think it's been different from the people that you worked for 15 years ago, who obviously were a little bit older, maybe had kids, maybe didn't? And what are some of the lessons that um, you are learning daily in how to be a great mom at home first, and then a great leader at work?
Hmm. It's hard. Like, when I first became a mother, I I think I still am the only woman creative director, and the only not the only woman creative director that has a child, and then the only Asian American creative director in the agency. So I felt a lot of pressure, and I once again purposefully didn't want to let that show or like bring my quality of work down. So I continued to work hard. Um, but there's as a lot of moms feel guilt about like, wanting to carve out a space for yourself here as a woman, as an Asian American, and then feeling guilty that you're not doing enough here as a mother. So the first 2 years, I had to find that balance between where I give and where I take and where I just, let go of control. Um, it took a while to kind of figure that out. I think I'm in a better place now, but you know, in a nutshell, I think it's about picking and choosing your battles and learning how to let go of control in situations that, maybe it's not that important at the end of the day. If like this thing happens like at work and you just let it play out because it's not going to impact the greater like holistic picture. And maybe it's better for me to spend time with my daughter like for an hour and miss this optional meeting just because I was going to show my face or something. You know what I mean? Like but it's hard. It's hard every day. But I think all mothers who are working mothers and mothers who work in demanding high level positions, like would say the same thing I'm saying right now. Yeah.
Thank you for doing both. My wife obviously does both. There's so many countless other women out there who are doing both. And um, I just decided we're going to air this episode on Mother's Day. So happy Mother's Day to
Oh,
everybody listening. Well, I mean, it's in like 3 days, so I think we can turn it around.
well, that's nice.
Yeah, happy Mother's Day to everybody listening.
Happy Mother's Day.
It's underrated. I think corporate America, corporate culture has this work above all or else. I hope, I guess, not I hope, let me ask you how you've been feeling and talking with your colleagues and friends. How has COVID-19 and all of us being home and the balance in our face of having to not deal with, balancing parenting and working and the expectations that arise from both angles? What are you optimistic about the conversations that are going to happen from a balanced perspective and prioritizing parental needs as we come
Hmm.
out of this? Because people, I mean, I used to be frightened if, oh my God, baby's crying in the back of a conference call. Now, who cares? This is who
Yeah.
I am. This is my life. And the expectation that we have perfect etiquette and protocol, even with
Yeah.
clients, I think people are a little bit more forgiving, I feel like. What are you seeing and what are you hopeful for?
I I actually, and I don't want this to sound wrong, but like I actually feel like it's the best thing that could have happened to us as a society in many ways. Like whether or not that is for political reasons or um, something like balancing parents' expectations and workload in the workplace, or even pushing forward with like digital like thinking. It's something that really I think forced everybody to kind of relook at everything. Like our agency is doing that right now, and it's refreshing to sort of see all the things that we had talked about, like with peers or like in groups that maybe didn't get to the level of leadership,
Right.
has now become a real consideration and like a real issue of like how do we move forward with all of these things in mind. And part of the reason why I joined that parent group to co-lead was because I want to make this difference, and I want everyone to understand just because I'm a mother doesn't mean that I'm going to underperform. So I kind of wanted to be like an example to kind of prove that like mothers can do this too. But this conversation, COVID-19 has kind of accelerated all of that to now they're talking about like parents whose kids aren't going back to school and how do we accommodate for them. That would have probably never have been a conversation or something that had taken seriously until they saw it like in action. Like the fact that we're working from home, it's like it's crazy. I go through like bouts of like anxiety and like guilt and like moments where I'm like about to lose my mind, to like gratefulness, like you
Hmm.
know like happy. The future is positive. Like for me, it's not scary. I actually think this is setting us up for a better future. Is how I feel.
What are some things you can share with a younger version of Lee, perhaps, or somebody who is excited to potentially enter the world of advertising and marketing? And who knows what that industry is going to look like in 10, 15 years. But based looking back from where you sit, all that you've gone through and all that you've observed, what are some tips and perspective gaining advice that you might want to share with somebody who's in that shoe now?
Hmm. I think for a mini version of me, I probably would say, like, you know, don't try to be like other people. I think constantly trying to fit in is works against you. If there is something that you truly want to do or aspiring to like accomplish as a goal, um, life is too short to not take that plunge or take that risk. And I think that's what it was for me. Like finally accepting that, like, you know what, my parents aren't gonna like this. They're not gonna support it, but I don't care. Like I'm gonna do it for myself. And that was the best decision I could have made for my career. So for anyone who wants to get into advertising, that would be the biggest advice I would say. Like take a risk. Like don't be scared.
This has been one of the more fun conversations I've had. I hate saying that because other guests might be like, "What about mine?" But I think it's different talking to parents who are going through this collectively at the same time. Our kids are about the same age, so we've sort of progressed through our parent journey um, concurrently. So it's been a challenge, and I think as we look to what kind of parents we want to be, not from my dad or my mom is this job title at this company, which matters nothing, but in terms of creating opportunities and the support system and the memories that unfortunately our parents maybe were not in the position to provide for us because they were busy trying to survive, um, and no fault of their own. They were literally trying to raise us the best that they could in a world and in a decade they were not familiar with. So all the props to them. And so um, on this Mother's Day, go, if you haven't sent flowers yet, because it's the socially distant thing to do, um, call her, um, just surprise her, do something nice. I think when we talk about when we talk to guests, particularly with uncommon career paths, bold career paths, sometimes we have misconstrued that decision as a rejection of our parents' love or a defiance of their order. And I'm here to tell you that you can do both. Um, Choosing to do something different than they wished for you is not disobedience. We were taught that. Our parents told us that they were proud of certain things and tied it to specific academic and professional achievements. Stop doing that. It's toxic and it's bad. You can be equally grateful for everything your parents have done for you and still choose to do the thing that makes you happy. That's called life. If you're graduating right now, if you're looking at internship opportunities, I've heard one too many times, well, it's the thing that I think I should do. It's what I've been told is good. And it may not even just be about going to medical law or engineering school. There are many people choosing high stress, very mundane business jobs because it has this allure of it's the next shiny toy. But pursue everything that you want. It is, look, I'll give you guys a little secret. Nobody in the history of HR will give you shit about what you did during the summer of 2020. Reasonable human being will understand what we were going through and realize that this was your chance to sort of reset, as we all are. So thank you for providing the context, especially on the mothers. I think um, underappreciated, expected to do more. As you mentioned in your field, not only the creative direction of the client work, but the collective culture of these externally seemingly fun environments. The cultures were created and enforced and reinforced by people who weren't moms and who certainly were not moms of diverse backgrounds. So it's good. It's so inspiring and awesome to see people like you rise to the levels that you have earned, but also not be so focused on just the work, but take time to mentor, to create an internship curriculum at the agency, and to take time out of your already busy life to work on the parent items. Because if you're so lucky, you get to have a little human being in your life, and that little tiny person will change everything about the way you view the world, and that is just so amazing. Lee, thank you again for coming on the show. you and I have talked about coming on the show for a little while, long before this stay-at-home stuff happened. And so I'm grateful to hear your story. I've always found your story inspiring because you decided early and you stuck to your decision to go off the beaten path. So would love for you to help us finish out the show by sharing a letter to us. Dear Asian Americans is a letter not only to us and from us, but ultimately for all of us, to inspire um, and to give hope and to share stories of the little girl who is feeling left out, not only in Catholic school, but in a very high intense academic environment, or somebody for whom maybe feel like they're being forced to study something or go to a school that is against their human desire and what they know they were put on this earth to do. So I'll start the letter, you finish, and share with us anything that you'd like to share with the Asian American community. So please finish the letter. Dear Asian Americans.
Dear Asian Americans, continue fighting the good fight. Stay true to yourself. Listen to your gut. Um, no one knows what's best for you more than you do. And don't feel guilty for making decisions that others might perceive as selfish. Um, be grateful and thankful for the opportunities that you were given, whether or not your parents were immigrants, and sacrificed, coming to this country to make a better life for yourself. Don't hold resentment for things that they don't understand, but continue to push forward and pave a new way for your generation and for the future generation to come.
Thank you. That was very beautiful. And nothing is beneath you. If you want the job, find people's phone numbers and cold call the shit out of them until you get a job. This might be the old dad in me talking, but people got to be willing to put in the work.
Yeah, you put in 100% of the time. You put in the work, you'll get something out of it.
I'm growing this podcast purely organically. I'm crazy, so I'm putting out, I don't know, it'll be now 50 episodes in the first 2.5 months. You're growing your own cooking Instagram, which documents your cooking journey, which I don't know how, I'm sure I'm not the only friend who's told you this. How the hell do you have the time to do that in addition to? Because it looks like your kitchen is a perfectly lit and decorated kitchen. Tell us quickly about that and why you wanted to create a source of creative expression outlet for you in something that you love doing.
Yeah, I've always loved cooking. I started cooking when I was like 8. So I've always come home and like cooked dinner from scratch. Like I don't like meal prep. I cook, and it's really tiring sometimes, but it's gratifying because it's like an artistic outlet for me in a way. I think work obviously is a lot more political and less artistic for me at this point. So for me, cooking brings me a lot of joy, and I like to feed people. I like to host people. So my kitchen, by the way, is not clean. It's Instagram magic. So don't think that. But no, it's not a chore to me because it's a hobby, and that's probably why it looks easier than it is. But I just enjoy doing it.
Very cool. Check out Lee and her cooking on Instagram at Cooking Off the Cuff. We'll put the links to her LinkedIn and other ways to connect with her. If you're a young woman wanting a mentor in the world of advertising, follow Lee, learn from her, learn with her. She may have a fancy job title, but we're not we're not too far or that far ahead in the game of life. Just a short decade and a half ago, we were all in your shoes, and whatever thing that you think is the end of the world, and seemingly so, 2020 has been a really crappy year. Life gets good. Life gets better. Life gets better actually, or you learn to realize that the things that are stressing you out today shouldn't be stressing you out, and you learn to appreciate and see life in a different way. Lee, thank you so much. Taking time away from your kid and work to spend a little bit of time with us to share your story on this Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to you and to everybody out there hustling. Have your husbands, have your dads, or have somebody else put the kids down early today. Go have a glass of wine. Celebrate everything that you've done and that you will continue to do, Lee. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me and putting me as your Mother's Day guest. That is amazing. That makes me very happy.
I
And thank
wish I would have taken the credit for it before we started recording, because in the beginning I was like, oh, I don't know when you're going to be listening to this, but why not?
well, that's just wing it. I think that's what it that's my style. Just wing it, and then you'll figure it out along the way. So
Ay,
it
ay,
all
ay.
worked out. But thank you, everybody, anyone who's listening. Really appreciate what you're doing. I think it's really great, and like you said, I don't think a lot of people are doing this, and it's very necessary.
Hey, man, if we don't tell our story, some tone deaf old white guy is going to do it. So I'd rather it be us. Bye, everybody.
Bye.